I wasn't sure what to talk about. I thought I'd give somewhat of an update on the project, but really focus more on giving you the big picture of why we're working on nanowires. Rafi talked about two solitudes. I think there's also two solitudes in terms of materials. We have silicon, which of course is well known for its applications in electronics, but there's another world which is 3.5 optoelectronics, which is good for materials needing optical activity. So let's just quickly review that. I think you already know this, but silicon electronics is very good for applications like visible CCDs, like in all of our phones. Obviously for computing, integrated circuits for other applications. The focus here is on photovoltaics. So it's relatively inexpensive, at least compared to 3.5 materials, but its efficiency is low or moderate, as Rafi already mentioned. These are typical metrics here, something like 4 cents per square centimeter, and about 20% efficiency are typical numbers. Now, in terms of 3.5s, the cost is much more expensive, something like $6 to $12 per square centimeter of cell area, although the efficiency is much higher. And of course, 3.5s have many other applications, so infrared detectors, LEDs and displays, and also for communication sources and detectors for optical communications. Now, what we really would like to do is integrate these, or combine these two worlds. If we could grow 3.5 materials on silicon, we could realize the high efficiency of 3.5 cells, but the low cost associated with silicon material. Okay, so let me delve into that a little bit deeper. This is one rendering, or one example of a triple junction high efficiency cell. So it's a triple junction cell. The bottom junction is germanium, and then the subsequent, the middle and the top cell are 3.5 materials. So we have indium gallium arsenide for the middle junction, and then we have indium gallium phosphide as the absorber for the top cell. Now, a large portion of the expense of this is associated with the germanium substrate. And so, as I said, if we could grow these 3.5 materials on silicon rather than germanium, we could significantly reduce the cost and yet maintain the high optical absorption associated with 3.5 materials, and therefore the high efficiency. Of course, you have to worry about other things like current matching and so on, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So the question is, can we integrate 3.5s with silicon? So the answer in terms of thin film technology is no, or at least it's very difficult to produce high quality material of 3.5s when grown on silicon. The main reason for that is because the material is lattice mismatch. So we have here the zinc blende crystal structure for 3.5 materials and the silicon diamond crystal structure for silicon. And these are typically not matched. They have different unit cell dimensions, different lattice constants. So when you attempt to grow 3.5 materials on silicon, you'll produce defects, namely dislocations, which I'm trying to show here. These can be represented as missing atomic planes. So you produce here, because of the lattice mismatch, so you produce dangling bonds where carrier recombination, non-radiative recombination can occur. So this reduces the, essentially kills the efficiency of a PV device. Okay, so this means that in terms of the map of the world of 3.5 materials and group 4 materials, you're restricted to certain lattice match material families. So we have here the band gap plotted in the sense of not as a function, but in this kind of phase space, we have the energy band gap and the lattice constant, and each of these points here represents a different material. And so, as I said, we're restricted because of this lattice matching criteria. We're restricted to certain vertical columns or families of material. So we have here, for example, the one used for solar cells. We have germanium here. If you add 1% of indium to gallium arsenide, we have indium gallium arsenide, which is lattice matched to germanium. And then you can form an alloy of indium phosphide and gallium phosphide, which produces a lattice constant in that column. So that produces the triple junction cell I showed in the previous slide. We have other lattice match families here, the indium phosphide lattice match material family, which is used for optical communication devices. And then the so-called antimonide material family here, which is used for infrared applications. Okay, so again, we can't stray too far left or right, too far outside of these vertical columns of lattice match materials, or else we'll produce defects like dislocations, which would kill the device performance. Now that's the case for thin films, but that's not the case for nanowires. So let me introduce what nanowires are, and how we grow them, and why we can grow them without worrying about lattice mismatch, and therefore how they can be used to produce low-cost solar cells. So first of all, how do we grow? What are nanowires? These are long, thin semiconductor material structures, microns long, and typically tens to hundreds of nanometers wide. And they're grown using this process. I don't have time to go through it in detail, but you pattern an oxide with holes, and material will accumulate and nucleate and result in the growth of nanowires wherever we have a hole in the oxide. So you'll produce these vertical columns, these nanowires of material. And again, these of course are 3-5 nanowires. So you can control with this process the length, the diameter, the composition, the doping, and the spacing between wires. Now, why don't we have to worry about lattice matching? Because the contact area of the nanowire to the substrate is extremely small, and you have the free surface of the nanowires. This allows the nanowire to expand very easily because of the large surface area, or to contract so that its lattice constant matches that of the substrate, in this case silicon. So you don't have to worry about lattice matching. How am I doing for time?
You're doing not so good.
One more minute? Let me jump ahead. Again, I don't have time. This is the details of the device structure, 3-5 nanowires on silicon. Let me jump ahead to the results. This is what we've grown, and this is the current, this is what we've grown and produced into a device. Let me cut to the chase. This is the current voltage characteristic of the best device that we've made in the last 5 years. Very modest. The efficiency is 3.4%. Look at the current though. The short circuit current, this is just a number of different curves that we produce for different devices. The best result has been a short circuit current of about, the best result is a short circuit current of 22 milliamps per square centimeter. That's extremely good. It's almost comparable to thin film devices. Where the nanowire device falls short is in terms of the open circuit voltage here. We only get around 0.4 volts when we should be getting around 1 volt. What is the problem? The problem is, we think, the doping. We've done a measurement technique called electron holography, which is done in a transmission electron microscope, which allows you to measure the potential difference between the N and P regions, the built-in potential of the junction. And we measure 0.4 volts, which is what we're getting from the current voltage characteristic. From this, you can determine the doping, and what we found is that the doping in the core of the nanowire is too low, by about an order of magnitude. And this is what's giving us the low open circuit voltage. So our next step, which we would be doing now if the MBE were working, but it's down right now for repairs. But the next step is to actually increase the doping of the core and hopefully see an increase in the open circuit voltage. Finally, I'll end with this. This is, we're not the only ones in the world working on this. There's actually 3 companies trying to, and research groups, but also 3 companies trying to commercialize this nanowire-on-silicon technology. These are the results I've compiled of all those researchers and companies. We're somewhere, this is a semi-log scale here, note. So these are the results going back all the way to 2009 to almost the present day, so 2013. The record efficiency for this technology is 13.8%, achieved by a group in Lund University in Sweden. We're very fast or quick on their heels, so we think we're going to get that very soon once we fix this doping problem. Okay, so that's the status of the field. Okay, I'll end there. Thank you very much.
So Karen, what's your question?
That's great. How that in the US?
I actually have a question just about this slide that's right up here. do you believe all of these efficiency measurements? What I mean by that is that some of the nanowire field has some exaggerated claims for their efficiency. It has to do with where they're counting the aperture of the light. And are these?
Yeah. So first, you'll notice there's two sets of data here. One is labeled array. So this would be like the forest of vertically standing wires that you saw in one of the SEM images earlier. Here you can do an aperture measurement and obtain a realistic efficiency measurement. The other family or grouping, the other type of PV device you'll see here is labeled single wire. And here it's not so clear what the measurement of efficiency means. Because what that is a single wire. People have plucked a single wire out and laid it down horizontally on a substrate and contacted the two ends to make a single nanowire PV device. And here you're illuminating a huge area, and so people have funny ways of normalizing the data, either with the illumination area or the single wire cross-sectional area, and there the efficiency results are questionable. You have to look carefully at how they actually define them. Yeah. But for the forest of wires, the numbers are real.
You said you're doping that by a factor of 10. Why is that?
So the way we grow the wires, if we go back to the mechanism, the cartoon here, the growth of the wires is mediated by a gallium droplet. So what happens is these holes in the oxides accumulate gallium and form droplets, and then the 3,5 material crystallizes out of that droplet and produces the nanowire. So the mechanism of growth, including doping in nanowires, is very different than thin films. So what we will calibrate the doping flux based on a thin film sample. We'll grow a thin film with a certain, say, beryllium doping flux for P-type material and measure that using Hall effect. But then the actual doping that you will get in the nanowire, not the thin film, but the nanowire here, could be very different because the growth mechanisms are completely different than a thin film. Okay? So there's very little work done on understanding how doping in nanowires takes place. But what's clear is it's very different than thin films.